I recently got to sit down and talk to Ryder Strong, who is a smart human, an incredible writer, about his new autofiction podcast, The Red Weather, which I am obsessed with. In this conversation, we talk about writing and nostalgia and genre and the 90s and what a season two of The Red Weather might look like. This is one of my favorite conversations I've had in a long time period, and I hope you have half as much fun watching it as I had having it. I'm going to drop you right in, so let's go.
Where did the impulse for this come from?
Uh,
Like, what was the germ of this idea? When did you start thinking about doing this?
okay. Well, there's the material, which is obviously like so much of my life. So there's like a lot of this I've been circling and thinking about for a long time. Things from my past, things from where I grew up. So I had like iterated on a lot of this material in fiction, short stories, um, in interviewing friends and recording them, which actually did start, some of that is used here. So I've been circling the material a lot. The idea of creating a fake true crime really came out of my frustration with not being able to make a film. I write scripts, I've been writing scripts, and nothing's been made. Things get sold, things get partially financed, almost financed, and then nothing happens. And I am surrounded by so many talented friends and actors, and I just want to work with people. I just want to do stuff. And so this, like, honestly, it was like, what can I do that doesn't cost anything but allows me to tell a story, and run around with friends and make something. And I was on a road trip with my family, and I was just like, oh, wait a minute, because like I love true crime. I was like, what if I just did a true crime thing and then just made a bunch of it up, and I could incorporate real things, So it was like, oh, and then it literally there was one song playing, and I'm not going to reveal the song because it actually reveals a little too much. But there's a very long song that has a ton of amazing lyrics, and it was playing while I was driving the car, and the entire podcast hit me. And in that one listen, I like knew everything that was going to happen. And then just spent the rest of the road trip like scribbling notes, scribbling notes, scribbling notes. And then it was still like 2 years of writing and outlining and whatnot, and actually recording. But in that moment, and the reason I don't want to reveal the song is because like actually it's pretty hysterical how many of the lyrics actually refer to things that ended up in the podcast. Like I went like when I got my production team together and we first started like actually making the thing, like I just sat them down and played the song, and I was like, it's kind of amazing, like it's all there. So let's just get into the spirit of this thing from that. Yeah. So it was a moment of like, oh, I saw the whole thing or heard the whole thing in my head, and I was like, okay, now I got to make it. And then it was just a matter of the grueling work of writing and interviewing people and putting it all together. Yeah.
Is that usually how ideas come to you, just like fully formed, or is that
No,
unusual?
no. Usually it's I do have a lot of ideas. Like my wife always just makes fun of me because I have too many. We're both writers, and she's mocks herself and says like I only have one idea every 3 years, but the difference is she writes it. Like she has one idea, she sits down, and like within 6 weeks she has a script. I am 5 ideas a day. I write them all down as like notes, and then I just don't come back to them. And then I just sort of wait for the ones that like I can't let go of to keep coming
Yeah.
back. And then I have to go back, and I have to keep thinking about it, and I have to keep writing it. And so, yeah, Red Weather was like, oh, I saw the whole thing. And obviously because a lot of it was based on my life. And I knew all the material I wanted to include that was real pretty much in that moment, right? Like, so I think because of that, it came fully formed, because it was like, oh, well, I can take this thing and that person and this experience, and I know that all this fits together. I just need that mystery and the true crime structure to sort of weave it all together. So
That's
it
so
was lucky,
interesting.
yeah.
Um, I was doing research because I'm an academic and that's what I
Yep.
do. But I went back to Literary Disco and I was listening to the crime episode, and you were talking about how one of the most important things in crime is having it so grounded in reality. And so I
Right.
wanted to ask you about genre
Yeah.
to hear like what was appealing about crime as a genre.
I mean, I love listening to true crime. I love crime as a genre. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I read a lot of books, but too. But for whatever reason, I listen to all my crime like books that I read. So all the Bosch novels, all the French. I just love the genre. I love the idea of mystery. I listen to true crime. I feel often icky about the true crime, like the real true crime, which is partly why I wanted to make this project too, to comment on that and to, but no, genre is, you know, I it's what I love more than anything. I love in film, I love horror, and in books, I love crime. Those are like my two. I also love horror in books. I just think, I came of age in college and then in grad school at a time when like, it was just literary fiction was what everybody wanted to do. And it was like literary fiction and like epic drama movies. And then everything else was like lower tier. And I'm so glad that that's not true anymore. I feel like the pop culture has finally like embraced this idea that like, wow, a movie like Weapons can have so
Oh my
much
gosh,
to
that's what I
say.
was thinking of.
Yeah.
I almost just was
Yeah.
like Weapons, like there's
Right.
so much
Yeah.
amazing horror.
That's the thing. I feel like, and I'm obviously like Get Out really cracked that door open. Like, I just feel like, oh, we all now understand that when you are writing within genre, it doesn't disqualify you from writing something intelligent or meaningful or having, thematic depth. So I've just always loved genre. And I also think that it's the most fun challenge. I teach screenwriting and like what I'm constantly telling them is, and maybe because I'm like you, I have an academic mind. I think in essays, like I think in ideas. And so my challenge as a writer is always, how do I make sure I'm not just writing an essay? How do I make sure that I'm not just boring the crap out of somebody, and that's what I tell my, when I'm giving my lectures, I'm always like, okay, make sure that when you're writing your screenplay, you're not writing a TED Talks, you're not writing a lecture, you're not writing an essay. Those are all cool things. Like, I hope my lecture is interesting. But by the way, you have to take notes and I test you on your ability to remember what I'm saying right now because it's that boring. It's like, whereas we don't want our movies to be taxing. We want them to be effortless. And that's what I love about genre. The magic trick of genre is that it's effortless. You're just enjoying it, and that's why like the best compliment that I take from Red Weather is when people are like, I just couldn't stop listening. Like, I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. Because then I'm like, great, I've smuggled in all my ideas. You didn't even notice that, that the genre was doing its work. Like, I was accomplishing the genre work and you hopefully are just enjoying it. And then maybe if you think about it late at night or you remember it, you'll be like, that was weird that person said that, or why did writer include this moment? And then hopefully it just, grows in your mind and makes you, I don't know, a better person or think deeper about something that you might not have otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a lot about immersion too, in terms of learning and pedagogy and values change. Because a lot of my scholarly work, not that I'm going to talk about me a bunch, but a lot of my scholarly work is about environmental communication, right? And how people change their minds. And the more immersed we are in something, the more our senses are activated, the better we absorb the sort of morals and ethics and lessons and values of the thing that we're engaging with.
That's really, yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Right.
But that's part of why I was so excited about this, because I like couldn't put it down, right?
Right.
And it had all of these bigger themes that I might want to ask you in a minute, all of a sudden have even more resonance maybe than they even did when you were making them, right? I mean, it is really hard not to listen to this and think about like the hidden dangers of like people around us without saying too much, right?
Right.
And so it is really interesting that what autofiction seems to be doing here is you've got both the kind of like you can direct to camera what you're thinking, but you also have this layer of cognitive estrangement where we know it's fiction, so we don't feel like we're being lectured at.
Right.
That wasn't a question. That was me just saying, I think that's brilliant.
No, that's exactly what I would hope for. Like that's the dream. It's like, and especially, like I talked about how I was trying to just, make a movie without having to raise millions of dollars to make a movie. Like the other thing that I have as a tool is that I do have people listening to me because of Pod Meets World. There's like, there's this fan base that knows me for this one thing. And that was part of the autofiction component for me. Again, it was like, oh, well, people might click on this just because it has my name and my voice and they know me. And then hopefully I can, make them stick around for 8 episodes and like draw them in. But I guess what I'm saying is that writer strong was also a kind of a genre that I was playing with. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like a weird thing that I had to realize, like, oh, right. Like if I put myself in this, which I, would seem like like something I would normally wouldn't want to do. I was like, but that's actually maybe the best way to like get started and get people in, and then, just rip myself apart and make myself look like an idiot. That makes.
I don't think you look like an idiot.
No,
I
but
think
Yeah, I'm not the best detective in the world. That's fine. That's part of the story.
Do you think that like sort of modeling not being perfect but trying to do better was part of what you were doing here?
Absolutely. I mean, from the get-go, like, I don't want to knock too many of the true crime podcasters out there, but there are several pretty high profile, pretty successful true crime podcasters that I've heard over the years, like especially like I would say like 5 years ago was like the sort of peak of this, where it would be like a lone dude. It was always a dude on a mission to like, save the day with his amazing podcasting investigative skills. And I just found it so like just horrifying, and like it was so easy to mock. And I was like, okay, like that was always one of my intentions. It's like, how can I inhabit that and then also undermine it in the best, in hopefully an effective way. So yeah, that was always, it was like, I'm not going to like, like one of my first thoughts was like, well, where would I go? And I'd be like, well, I'd walk into the Sebastopol police station. And then I quickly realized that is the wrong, that's not where this person's, and it was like, okay, great. Well, that's a scene. That's scene number 1. Like I just knew I was like, I would screw this up and I'm just going to throw it all in there. I'm just going to keep screwing up. And then hopefully, make that part of the story in a good way, pay it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun as a listener because you're both thinking like, well, what would I do in this situation? And it also disrupts the sort of, because you've got these themes underlying kind of bias. And I mean, you go a lot of different places. It also keeps you from like white knighting those issues.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I have seen so few things where people are tackling issues and saying like, this is a problem, but doing it in a way that comes from like humility rather than a kind of like, hold on, I figured this out and I'm going to fix it.
Right.
Type thing.
Right. Yeah. No, that's, I, like I said, I just knew that like having heard these other podcasters, well, let me put it this way. There's an amazing true crime podcast called Someone Knows Something. It's a Canadian podcast. And what's so beautiful about it is that the host, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he is insanely humble. And his whole approach is to, sometimes he's interested in solving the crime, but mostly it's about telling the story of the crime and spending time with the people that were affected by it. So you get these scenes where he's like discussing, a missing person with that person's family and just sitting with them and talking with them. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful, very Canadian version of the true crime genre.
Right.
And I realized like, oh, right. Like there's so many that are not that. They are just the white knight. They're all self-promoting. And like, I mean, God, down to the music that these people would put on their podcast where they're like, I'm going to solve the crime. And I'm just like, oh my God, I need to like, I need to make sure that Ryder Strong, who isn't that necessarily, but is commenting on that, is doing the is trying to be the savior in some capacity, whether it's,
right.
in honor of this relationship from his childhood or to like restart his career and all, I wanted to like very much make that, part of the podcast. Cause I just think first of all, I just think it's funny and kind of fun. But also very thematically important to me. Cause there's obviously the stuff I wanted to say that plays really, really plays into.
Yeah. Well, you have that sort of fantasy, right? And one of the later episodes too, where you're like,
right.
I'm with them,
right.
We're charging in, right? And so that kind of meta commentary, right? But I think actually what I'm trying to say is like, there's so much self-awareness, that it's just incredibly balanced and impressive. Can we talk about music a little bit
Oh
more?
yeah,
Because the
yeah,
music is
yeah. The
beautiful
music's
in
amazing.
this. The last couple of moments of this podcast are
Oh,
incredible.
I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, Kyle really brought it. Kyle Morton of the band Typhoon. I've just been so lucky to be his friend because I was a fan first. I was a fan of his music. This was a social media thing that was, like connecting with you. Just felt like, oh, this is what social media can be good.
Right.
I just tweeted back when I was on Twitter. I just tweeted something positive about their lyrics, and someone from the band saw it and was like, "Oh, we love Boy Meets World," and then they ended up playing my wedding just as a favor because they were ending their tour and my wife and I were getting married in Portland. They came and played, and Kyle and
So
I stayed in touch and became like best friends. And he's just a genius, both musically but also just intellectually. And talking to him, and she's just a great friend. So yeah, so he was like, he's gonna score everything I do for the rest of my life. And when it came to this, like I brought him in early on, like in very early stages, and we would send each other stuff. I was sending him outlines, I was sending him scene ideas, and he would give me notes, feedback on creatively on the direction of the whole thing, but then also started sending me bits of music that I was just like, that's it, this is it. And we just honed in on this sound. We wanted it to have like Angelo Badalamenti, Twin Peaks sort of theme. Yeah,
yes.
the opening, we were like, because there's this like level of sort of this operatic, like romantic theme that's being undermined by like the rest of the song. Like in a way, like that was the idea of the theme, is like, Ryder as a character is wanting to be a hero, but like constantly it should be getting darker and getting pulled down. And so that's the theme. And I got to sit in the room with him. He has a studio, basement studio, and he's played on the piano, and we just keep going back and forth until we found it. And then he would send me pieces based on the episodes as we were going. Basically, every episode has its own theme, variation that's running throughout that whole episode. And then I got to go up with him for about 5 days. We were in the studio after I had recorded everything, and we were mixing and editing. I got to sit with him and find more stuff. Like I think one of my favorites is like the Elric episode. We sat down together, and we were like, okay, so it should sound, we should find a way to like make it sound like a cult, a group of people, out in the woods. And like, how does it, have this like, and so he brought out this mountain dulcimer, which it's like this metallic thing, and he starts pounding it with a mallet. And then he played the Red Weather theme on it, like strummed it. And it was just so beautiful. And then I was just like, wait, there needs to be like a human element. And he's like, okay, this is going to be kind of awkward that you're sitting here. And he just hummed over the theme, and he recorded himself humming like 5 different times and created these harmonies. So that is like, oh, and it like we were just talking it through. I was like, okay, well, what happens is Elric is creepy, and we're weirded out by him, and we think it's like, oh my God, we're going to get to the heart of some awful mystery. And then it should be kind of sad and tragic. And he
Yeah.
managed to tell that entire story in the arc of this like 3-minute musical piece that, yeah, you don't ever hear it isolated on its own, but it's in the background of the whole episode. It's so powerful. And it was so fun to just be in the room with him and like, have that, because I have no musical talent. I just wish I did, and I like being around it. So like, talking music through with him, and he's just so open. It's really fun. Yeah.
It seems like you have done an amazing job as an adult making art with people you care about,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I
It's the
mean,
dream. Yeah.
and I feel like as a parent, right, and a partner and it's hard to see your friends
Yeah.
sometimes. So like
Yeah.
building things in. So what was it like to work on this with so many people in your life?
Yeah. That it was the best feeling in the world, and that's why like this is not a money making project or something that I would do. I really thought that, one season was all I would ever be able to get to do. But now I'm like, this was so much fun, and everybody involved, like, it just bonded us all together. Yeah. And I'm like, we should do another one. Like if iHeart will let us, which I don't know what it takes. Numbers wise, like I don't know, but like if now I'm super stoked on the idea of a season 2, because I'm just like, it was, and for that reason, like collaboration is just the best. And I love it. Like yeah, it became an excuse to like go to Portland and sit with Kyle for 5 days and make music. I went, going back to my hometown and like recording my friends, and then also being able to honor actors by writing parts for them, knowing them, or taking real friends and expanding their characters into more of a character by writing dialogue for them in addition to interviewing them. Like I did a lot of stuff like that. And also just the fun of like, and I do this every time I've directed stuff. I relearn the lesson that every actor is different. And like, there are actors who will never say a line as it's written. They just constantly want to improvise. And then there are actors who cannot improvise. They can just say exactly as it is. And if they try and improvise, you're screwed. And they're all good. Like there's no like one way to be an actor, And
Right.
so for me, like this was an opportunity to just be with actor friends again and work to their strengths and figure out like, okay, this person I need to feed lines to, this person I need to not give them any lines or just give them a situation. And there was a lot of, weird flexibility within that because of course my wife is playing herself and my brother's playing himself and they're both actors. So I was like, there's so much juggling of real and not real. It was super fun. It was so much fun. So much fun.
That is amazing. Yeah. Can I tell you one thing that jumped out at me right away where I was like, I'm going to like this so much more than I even thought? When you introduce Alex, you introduce her as a multi-hyphenate,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like it is so rare to hear men introduce their wives talent first. Do you know what I mean? I do sometimes like, yeah, but I like clocked that right away where it was like, not about like appearance or how she makes you feel or any of these things, but like oh, wow. My wife is like a full person with like multiple talents.
Right.
It was just like another one of those little things where I was like, this like the allyship in here is really, really impressive.
Yeah, I never thought about that word before, but I do feel because you said that in your first video, and it struck a chord. I was like, allyship, like. That is like the primary value of the red weather, I think. Like that, I never thought about it.
Yes.
But like that, like if I could boil everything that I was trying like to do thematically down to like one word, it was pretty much the perfect word. That never occurred to me, but it's like the work of allyship is like what I'm interested in and like what that means and like, how that can, how poorly somebody can be at it just as much as how good somebody can be at like trying to show the whole spectrum of that is like really what I'm interested in. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the character of Monica too, there was so much that went on there too. There's a moment I think where you say something and she's like, "Oh, Ryder," and it's just like,
so much fun. Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny because you can't hear it. But that is the only time that I actually like really I almost couldn't finish the scene because I got so emotional at the final scene with her. It's really weird. Of all of the scenes, her like doing the whole like admitting to her that we had met and I avoided her and I hear it every time I listen now. I'm like, I'm trying to not cry while I'm saying those lines because it was like for whatever reason that relationship and that turn got to me like as an actor it was a weird like, oh, and so yeah, still to this day that scene makes me cry. Like it's so funny. Yeah.
It's amazing. And like giving those moments to Monica, to your wife, right? Where this is a little spoilery and I can always cut this or put it in, we could separate it. But that moment where she's like, have you talked to any women? I like yelled. I was like, oh, this is so good.
Yeah.
This is so good.
I mean, it was, yeah. And that, I mean, that came out of me in the process of making the thing, realizing that was the case, that I hadn't interviewed, and I was like, oh, I had two choices at that point. It was like, okay, now I need to track down women that I grew up with and actually interview them, or I think that kind of is the point, that I had really made this mistake and really not thought this through, and that needs to be the point of this piece. And like, I should just go with that more than try and like, because it's fictional, I can make that the sort of the arc. Because hopefully I was hoping that people wouldn't actually notice it. But no,
Yeah.
I mean, that actually, no, you know what that came out of? Very specifically, that came out of, so in order to sell the Red Weather, to get iHeart to, distribute it, I made a 15-minute demo, which is essentially the first 15 minutes. And it's changed a little bit, but it's basically the first 15 minutes. And one of the first people that listened to it for feedback was my friend Todd Goldberg, who did Literary Disco with me. And he was just like, Ryder, it's all dudes. You only have male voices. And I was like, oh God. And that was when I realized, like, oh, I haven't thought through like that. And then I was like, that's going to become part of the story. Like, this is too good. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's all habituation too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
also like how we grew up in the 90s thinking about gender and friendship and all those things that you touch on. But it is like the constant work of undoing some of that ideology,
Right.
right? Which is, I think, defining a lot of our adult lives, especially in a moment that's so politically
Right.
terrible.
Charged. Yeah. Well,
Charged is a better word.
right.
Charged
But
is
I
a better
also
word.
think that, like, there's so much that I feel like we were raised with, again, because, like, actually, when you go back, it was like there was a lot of, like, multiculturalism was huge. There was a lot of feminism, but it was like there was a lot of overt conversation going on. But meanwhile, there's all the, like, the subtle, like, actual day-to-day stuff where sexism just still was thriving, right? And, like,
Yeah.
and I think that, now we're living in this right reaction, which is like so strong, and, like, in a lot of ways overreacting to the wokeism or the moment of, like, liberal ascension. And it's like, in all of this, both directions, the lived experience with it, like, is lost so often, like what it's actually like to be, like, misogynistic. Like, yes, of course, like, there's overt awful misogynists and rapists in the world, but then there are also just, like, the way that you just talk, or the way people talk about their wife or whatever. And you're like, oh, and that, like, that's the area that I was most interested in, is, like, all those subtle, those smaller ways that, I hope that I'm servicing through art, what essays have a harder time getting at. Because, like, there's great essays being written about a lot of this stuff. There's great lectures. There's great, but, hoping to reach people on a subtler level and to make them hopefully consider their own behaviors or choices and paths in a way, that goes like, oh, right. Like, that wasn't awesome that I did this thing or didn't do this thing or whatever,
Well, I mean, this type of media, like exciting, fun media, breaks out of the same bubbles of the people who would be reading the essays in the first place.
Right.
Right. I mean, that is a self-selecting group of people, which is one of the things that, like, I'm playing with and thinking about and stuff too, and trying to do things more in public and short form rather than writing scholarly journals and that kind of thing. But
no, absolutely. Because, I mean, yes, I mean, that's the whole, like, ivory tower academia thing is a bummer, right? Because, like,
yes,
there's people like, you are this way because you're in it, but, like, for me, like, I would be in college all the time. Like, I would have left. Like, it's just my dream is to be sitting around reading books and watching movies and talking about it, critically. Like, oh my God, this is nothing better. I created Literary Disco just to keep doing it. So, like, but those are the people that often don't need to be reached the more. Like,
right.
So it's finding ways to, like, that's why I really appreciate, like, what you've been doing, because I think, like, I get so uncomfortable with the whole, like, talking to camera, TikTok video stuff. Like, I'm just like, I'm so bad at this. But I really think that that's become like, the whole influencer medium is a very powerful medium. It's how we're all getting our information now. So let's take advantage of it. Let's try and use it for good.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully. And what you said too, like, there are really, I mean, obviously I know all the information about how isolating it can be and bad for mental health and that kind of thing. But I have found real community, like, I have made friends this way too. Like, there is a way of, like, finding your people that you wouldn't normally find going to a college classroom or something too. And it just feels a little more expansive.
Yeah.
Okay. Monsters or physical media? What do you want to talk about next?
Either. God, no, both sound exciting. Let's go with monsters.
Okay, great. So, so when you were talking earlier, I made a note because I wanted to talk about music and come back to this. But so horror and crime are like kissing cousins, kind
Yeah.
of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in horror, right, the monster is the thing that is too scary for us to look at directly. It's like the return of the repressed and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And so in crime, like there's still kind of a monster, but it's more grounded. So
Mm-hmm.
I would love to just hear a little bit more about what you were thinking about in terms of
Yeah.
like the horror of this and the kind of monstrousness of the crime and that sort of thing.
What I've always loved about crime is because like in horror, like in the most basic horror, like I'm thinking especially in terms of film, it's like you know what Blake Snyder calls like the monster in a house, right? It's like you create a setting and then there's and whether that's the ocean and it's Jaws, whether it's a house and you're it's Misery and it's a nurse, whatever it is, there's a context that's very limited, and then there's this like evil awful thing out there that's coming to kill you or eat you or destroy you, whatever. And in crime, like mystery detective crime especially, or like trying to solve a crime, it's often that you start with the monstrous thing, the body, and we need to go find the bad person, and then it invariably in the best crime circles back to you in a way, or circles back
Mm,
to like the larger problem of like the town or the society or the the affair that's been hidden for so like that, like the mystery that you set out to seek is like very directed towards an obvious monster, and then it ends up being the surprise, hopefully if it's good mystery, or it ends up being more within yourself or within the hidden parts that nobody even was thinking about, right? Like
yeah.
that's how I was thinking, is like what is going to be the like if I'm going back to my hometown and I'm investigating a missing person, or and that I want to find the big bad villain out there who in this case looks to be like probably this commune dude who started this weird all the like weirdo obvious things, or maybe it's this tech bro who I don't like already, like I'm trying to find like the monsters out there, and then having that come hopefully full circle to something more like broader and like a little more systemic, that I hopefully is surprising, and then also like closer to home. Yeah.
I just wrote down structural before you said that
Right.
too, but you just said systemic. And I think
Cool.
that's one of the things that I love about this is it's
Yeah.
like it's about who did it, but it's also about like how do we miss things
Totally.
and that kind of thing. Um, I really want to talk about the physical media aspect of this too, because I thought it was really neat
Yeah.
how many of the episodes were structured around like an
Yeah. Tape.
artifact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like an envelope or
Oh yeah. Yeah.
um and there were so many other things I picked up this time around that just immediately like brought me back to a time and place too. Like when you're talking to Lainey and you notice the secret, what is it? The Secret Lives of Birthdays or something like that on her shelf.
Yeah.
I immediately I flashed back to like sitting cross-legged in a Walden books. Like I
Oh yeah.
immediately saw the cover.
Good.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Totally. Totally.
Um, and it was very grounding. So can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about like how you incorporated these pieces of physical media and the
Yeah.
Substack with like the extra
Yeah.
the extras and that sort of thing?
Well, I think like the main one of the main challenges was trying to because so much of like screenwriting is thinking visually, right? You're like just constantly having to like, how do I take this story or this idea or this conflict and externalize it, make it so I can see it, and make it as visually pleasurable as possible for viewers so they just keep watching and engage with the material. And in this case, of course, all you have is sound. And so it was a challenge, but then it was really fun to think of like, well, what would be the coolest thing to hear, if you were listening to a true crime thing? What is and it's like, well, the recordings, and that was obvious. And then I was like, well, mixtapes, man, like that's what I think of when I think about the '90s. And then,
Obviously.
yeah, and then trying to find, I mean, when it comes to like the pager and the like actual evidence and the books. A lot of that was like, I really wanted to, because I am like, when I was a teenager, my friends used to call me Nostalgia Boy because I don't know why. I just have I think it goes back to Stand By Me, my obsession with that movie when I was a kid. But like, I've always had this like sentimental, you know, lens looking back and like, oh, the time when, and I wanted to play with that and subvert that. And so part of that project meant like, what are going to be the touchstone things for me primarily, like let's get very specific. And if I focus on those things, hopefully there'll be touchstones for other people too, like it would be like a mixtape. It would be a pager. It'd be like VHS we talk about, or mini DV, like getting very specific about that. Like, I just knew that those would be like little flags for us 90s kids to like grab onto. And,
Right.
that was part of my job, is like, and I think that I've been thinking about nostalgia a lot because of Pod Meets World, and because like, why do people keep watching Boy Meets World? Like, why do people, and it's like on one, and we do these 90s cons, like where people, and it's like, so it's a very powerful force, especially when the world's in turmoil, like, and it's a reactionary thing. And it's at its heart, there's something very conservative about nostalgia. I find, it's like way back when life was better and simpler, and it's like, no, life was not ever simpler. You just were
A child.
younger and dumber, so you didn't know, right? Or we had blinders on, like because culturally we had blinders, like we weren't thinking about these things that we can now see very clearly what was going on, right? So that, like, I wanted to just complicate nostalgia. Like, that was priority number one, is like, use nostalgia, invite people in with nostalgia. I am, as an actor from the 90s, a prop of nostalgia in a lot of ways. So like, I wanted to like use all of that, make the narrator, as sentimental as possible about all of that, but then constantly subvert the power of nostalgia and show that, like, if anything, which I think I say in like episode 2, it's like, it's blinding me. Like, nostalgia is like preventing me from being able to see things clearly. And I'm now empowering these objects that probably shouldn't have any meaning with too much meaning. And, so yeah, I just think nostalgia is like really tricky, and I feel it, like I feel the impulse, but I think it's probably not great
Yeah.
in general.
Nostalgia and fantasy are the two genres that tend to come back most in moments of political turmoil. Like, there's been research done
Interesting,
on
right? So
that.
it's like
Uh-huh.
escapism, and then like return to the bygone
To
good times.
Right.
Wow.
When you
Right.
felt safe because somebody else was probably taking care of you,
Right.
right? I mean, if you were in a sort of privileged position to
Right.
have that have been your childhood. Yeah.
Right.
But also, it just makes me think about the connection between fantasy and nostalgia as a kind of fantasy as well, because it
Totally.
is so heavily filtered through people's lenses.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to like give yourself, it's like myth making of your own childhood. Do you know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, I think those are the worst nostalgia stories. Like, those are the ones that I just can't watch or read, when it's just like, remember when life was good, and it's just like,
We all
stop, like,
played in the
no.
woods and walked to
Yeah.
school and yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I remember a lot about the 90s that wasn't that as
Totally.
well. Can we talk about audience for a minute, and like who you hope this finds and what you want them to get out of it and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Um, well, yeah, I mean, I think, my primary audience was going to be, fans of either Pod Meets World or Boy Meets World or me. And so I knew that was like an asset just to get people, to listen. So I was really hoping that those people would just want to go along on the ride. And so that was my primary audience. And then, yeah, I would love it. I'd love to think that I'm reaching people who have no idea who I am and still just kind of like, like the story. I was worried, and I do think that there's a big drop off of people that want their true crime absolutely true, right? Like, there's those listeners who it's purely about the documentary factor, and if they know that any aspect of it is fake, they're out. So I knew that I was cutting off a big segment of the population there, just invariably, because of the nature of the project. And then, yeah, I don't know. I hope it's exciting enough to keep the people that tune in, to keep listening. And like, I've been really, really happy with the feedback. Like, I just don't know. I don't know how to reach more people. Like, I would love, like I said, more people who have no idea who I am, have never watched Boy Meets World, to still find it, because I would hope that it's enjoyable beyond that. But yeah, I genre fans, people that like mysteries, people that like, I don't know. I'm just hoping for as wide of an audience as possible. I know for me, like, a big impetus to this project too is like, I've tried to listen to pure fiction stuff, like pure fiction podcasts, and it's hard. Like, the ear is really attuned to false performances, or false, like, sound design. And so as a podcast maker, I was going to say filmmaker, but there's no film parts to it. I really, really wanted to face that challenge and say, like, how can I make the unbelievable parts of this believable? How do I, keep the audience always slightly unsure about, like, what's a real scene, what's a real conversation, what's not. And, luckily my team, because I was really afraid when I, put my team together, producers and executives and stuff, that I would get a lot of pushback because, like, bad sound is an issue. Like, you don't want leaf crunches and poorly recorded stuff, or just Zooms or phone conversations. And I was like, no, we're not going to ever go into a studio. We're going to do everything real, because, I'm actually recording my friends for these conversations. I'm going to recreate some scenes with actors where it's going to sound like crap at times. And we just got to lean into that. And I'm glad, because at this point, like, virtually nobody, even people who are in the podcast, have reached out to me and been like, what's real and what's not? Like, they're in it and they don't know. And I'm like, great. Yeah. Oh my God, you can't tell? Cool. People checking in on me and Alex and how we're doing as a couple. Like, we're fine.
Totally.
But,
okay.
You don't know, like, people just don't, right. They don't, it's fun. It's super fun. So that is, like, of all the things, like, I'm so proud of the fact that even people who are participating in the podcast are still like, but that part was real and this part was fake, right? And I'm like, maybe, I don't know. I love it.
I like that you're playing it close to the vest too.
Yes.
I had to, after the first episode, I started listening to it driving between Scranton, Pennsylvania and Binghamton, from my father-in-law's to my best friends. And after the first episode, I started listening to the second episode and the disclaimer came on, and I had to be like, wait, hold on. Like, I had to actually go on the computer and be like, oh, it's autofiction. Okay. So there are fictional parts of it, but it is, and I would keep forgetting too. It's a really, autofiction seems like such a, like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like a kind of like inside craft thing.
Totally.
And it's just such a brilliant medium for this. I'm just going to compliment you for the next 15 minutes.
I feel privileged that I have, because I've really enjoyed a lot of the autofiction that's come out in novel form for the last 15, 20 years. I feel like that's been the movement, right? Like Sheila Heti, Knosgaard, and Ben Lerner I love. And I just love how because I feel like there's a way in which you can be more honest, because you are allowing yourself the permission to insert fictional things, and then it's like it becomes this bigger, more thematic thing that you're making. And I was like, well, actually, because I'm an actor, because I can perform and talk and narrate and host in a way, like I have that skill set. It just was like, oh wow, autofiction in a podcast form, which I don't know if it's been done. Like I was like, that I have this opportunity. Like that's what I have, because I do podcasting. Like I have this pedestal and this, ability. Like let's lean in and use that for autofiction. It was super exciting to me, and it still is. Like, and now I just want to keep doing it if I can. Don't run out of material from my real life. But, yeah.
Well, I want a season 2 so badly.
Awesome. I'm so glad.
What if you were given the opportunity, like if the opportunity arose to do a season 2, do you have any idea what you might direction?
Yeah, I didn't. I really when I when I pitched this and iHeart bought it, it was part of the contract. Like they had the option to create, pick up for a season 2. And I was like, whatever, like there is no season 2. Like this story blows it out. But then through the process of making this, I realized like, oh no, there's a lot of material in the other side of my adolescence, which is the Hollywood side. There's a lot of stories and kids who fell through the cracks in that world. And I realized, oh, I know exactly what the story is and who it's going to be about. And yeah, I'm super excited. Like now I just want to make it like, because it's like I spent, so basically like, my childhood or my adolescence was divided between LA and Northern California. And I feel like, oh, I covered so much of the Sebastopol side of my life, but there's like the Oakwood apartments where we all, there's the set, Boy Meets World. There's like and like all that aspect, which is kind of the same era, but a completely different side. And I still am in touch with all those people. And there are some amazing real stories and real characters that I can dive into that will be like totally fresh. And yeah, so I'm like, okay, that's season 2. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. How does this all, how do you have big questions that you ask as an artist? Like, are there things that you find yourself as a writer and an artist returning to? And how does this kind of fit in?
Definitely gender. And in particular coming at masculinity. Because I think I'm not sure why, but like it really, that seems to be like one of the number one themes that I return to again and again. I think maybe part of it was that I found myself in this position of being like a teen idol, which was so weird and made me feel a certain amount of pressure to be something, and I always felt like I was failing in a certain, like, to live up to an ideal. And then, continuing to fail into my 20s where it was like, I don't know. I guess the idea is that like, if you're an actor and a movie star, that you sort of, appeal to an idealized version of your gender, like often that seems like the case. And the fact that I felt like I was a failure in so many ways and not living up to these ideals, made me think about them, I think, and just critically, and made me question myself and my behavior and then the people around me. And so I guess like, and this was way before like toxic masculinity entered the mainstream. I feel like I was always kind of circling these ideas. Like I said, a lot of this material goes back. The real suicide that inspires the first episode, I mean, that goes back to early 20s. So, and I was using that as a launching point for other projects before, but the real inspiration was 22-ish. So, these ideas and like thinking about regret and how, my behavior and, my performative masculinity and like all those kinds of things. So yeah. And then I think, like my brother and I were writing screenplays together for a while, and we ended up writing a script at one point called Men's Rights, RITES, which I still would love to make someday. And it got us a lot of heat and a lot of attention. It was sort of really taking on the men's movement head on, and like this whole, Sam Keane, Fire in the Belly, like new agey thing that we had sort of lived through in the 90s, like taking that on in the era of Trump. Strangely still relevant. We didn't get the project off the ground.
Unfortunately.
It got us jobs. I know. And it was so funny because when we were, shopping that script around, everybody was like, we've got to make this now because it's so timely. And that was in 2018, 2019. It's like, no. And, and that's why like recently I had some producers read it and they were like, oh, this is really relevant. We should. And I was like, okay, if you want me to go back in and rewrite it, it doesn't take much update. And unfortunately it's still really relevant. So yes, I would say thematically, like masculinity has been, and gender has just been a huge overriding issue in my life. But not everything, but obviously like that's a big thing. But yeah, I definitely try and approach big ideas. I do think and this is what I tell my students, it's not always great to start with the ideas though, right? Like that's what I love about genre, is that it gives me a good container for those ideas. Because I think I can also just get too heady and too abstract, and then I lose what makes movies fun, TV fun, podcasts fun. Like, people aren't listening for the ideas, right? Like, they're listening for the story, and then hopefully there are good ideas. There are plenty of other podcasts that are just for ideas, but like when I'm doing something like this, like I have to constantly remind myself, like, no one cares about how cool your ideas are. They only care about the story. And then maybe, well, eventually, yeah. But yes, like in terms of like, sneaking in those ideas and into a story, like they're going to keep listening because they want to know what happened to Anna, right? Like that's
Right.
that's the overwhelming question that I have to keep reminding myself. Like they really want to know how Ryder's investigation is going and what's the next, and so trying to keep it concrete, trying to keep it focused on that, and let the ideas sort of live through them and bubble up through the surface. And that's what's fun about like this form. And because like in film, you don't ever, well, you could, but you very rarely get to turn to the camera and be like, and what I was thinking about this scene that you just saw. Whereas in a podcast, I can do that, like I can
Yeah.
be your guide as a host, like also helping you, like see what's happening and what, and like reading the scene that we just lived through. So it was a really fun format for me because it's like really appeals to the way my brain works, which is like story, suspense, mystery, but then also this sort of analytical, some would say overly analytical part of my brain that like really just wants to dive in and tell you how to, think about something or whatever. And so like this was just the perfect, and that's like so many of my friends that have listened to it, like the thing that they say is like, Ryder, this is the most Ryder thing I've ever seen. And what they mean by that is not just that it's about my life, and it's also like the whole like structure of it and the whole idea of like analyzing my past, obsessing over these little moments and like rearranging and reading it. Like the people that know me know that that's very much me, like there's so many ways in which this podcast is like exposing obviously my biography and like huge, very like scary parts of myself, but it's also exposing like the real truth of like how I kind of think about the world. Like it's very honest, as much as it's fake and I'm constantly claiming it's fiction. Like it's like the most honest thing I've ever done in my life.
Well, it comes across as really authentic, and I think that's one of the things that's really compelling about it too.
Yeah. I hope I've answered some of your questions, or yeah, elucidated a little bit of what it was like.
I mean, this is a dream for me because I came across a piece of art that I really loved and I had a million questions, and then I got to ask you a million questions. So thank you for letting me do that.
Again, I am so grateful we were able to have this conversation. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments, and thank you for being here.